Oh, hey. It looks like we're starting now. Okay, well, hey guys, my name's Tyler, and I'm going to be talking about technology today. That's what today's message is going to be about. And I just wanted to start with a little intro, talking about technology and some of the advances in technology that we've had. We'll give some definitions about what technology really is later on, but let's just start with, a good example that we all know about, fire. Fire is one of the first technologies that humans were able to come up with. And you might think fire is not really something humans invented, but the technology was the ability to create fire or make fire happen consistently using the materials around us. Another technology that was a really big deal in the ancient world would have been bricks. And you might think a brick, that's not really technology, that's just a piece of rock. But bricks, having that piece of rock in a certain shape and being able to build with it more efficiently, that was something that we came up with as humans eventually. And it changed a lot of things. And we'll be talking a little bit more about the significance of bricks later on. Um, we could fast forward a little bit to some more bigger, notable inventions. We have things like the first airplane made by the Wright brothers. We have things like the light bulb, who one of the key people to help invent that was Thomas Edison. Things like that changed just the way that we live. Light bulbs, we have them everywhere now, and we don't have to go to bed as often when it gets dark outside because we have light, 24/7. Whereas before you would have had to light a candle or burn a lamp or do something like that to keep the light around. But now we have light everywhere we go at night. So yeah, we have all these different uses of technology. Let's talk about some of our modern things that we have. Today we have like one of these guys. If you guys have one of these, you can, well, maybe don't look at it right now unless you're watching this on one of these. But this is just a phone, what we would call a phone. And it's got a full computer on here, and we can do pretty much anything on this guy. We can talk to people on the other side of the world. We can text, we can watch movies, we can look up news, we can get the answer to billions of different things on this little device right here. And hold on one second. Just got to check this. Sorry, I'm just a little bit distracted. Okay, yeah, so we have our phone, and this somebody, a friend of mine from my community group, Graham, he gave me a really good analogy of kind of what this phone is like. Think about it like this. Our phones are kind of like this. Imagine you were somebody who just lived on a farm, and there weren't very many other houses for several miles. You lived on the farm out in the country, and what you focused on in your day-to-day life was just, what to do on the farm and your family around you that lived on the farm. And then one day a highway came in, and they just built a highway right down the middle of the road, and the city kind of came in around you. And now there's, people all around you. There's all kinds of different noises and sounds and distractions. And that's kind of what our phone does. It's like a highway for the world to come right into our personal everyday life. So everything in the world really is on this highway, and you have access to it, and it's right there in your hand, and it's just can constantly be interrupting us, like it's been kind of interrupting me in this video so far. And it can be a huge distraction. During our controversial conversations message series, we've been talking about all kinds of controversies in the society around us. And most of these controversies have been things that, there's different sides to these controversies. There's different points of views, and they are often within like groups of people. And it's a big societal controversy. Now, there might be a little bit of controversy around technology, but for the most part, technology it's a part of our everyday life. We, generally speaking, accept it and continue to use it. And there's not too many people who are going to come and say, oh, I think technology should just be completely abolished. It's just something that we shouldn't use anymore. And part of the reason for this is because technology has been a very integral part of human life all the way, again, since the beginning. And so the controversy I really want to talk about today is not one that is in our society, but it's actually a controversy that each of us is having within our own hearts. And that is, how do we use this technology? What is our responsibility with this technology? And I really want to encourage a conversation that you can have with yourself about the way that you use your technology. So, if you came into this thinking, I am ready to learn about technology, how we should use it, and I'm going to immediately go and apply it to my neighbor or to anybody else, I want you to take a step back, and I really want this to be a message that everybody can apply to themselves first. Because we all have a struggle and a battle going on within ourselves of how to use this. How much time should we be spending on our technology? What kind of stuff should we be doing on our technology, on our screens? And, should we be using our technology as much as we do? So all of these questions are going to be things that we're going to be going over more in today's message. And I really want each of us to be able to take what we've learned and apply it to ourselves first, and be able to have that conversation with ourselves and think about the way that we're using technology in a biblical way. And so we're going to be doing that in this message. I'm going to continue the rest of it in person, so I will see you in a couple of seconds.
Hello, almost 0 seconds. Here I am in person for everybody who's here at church, and it's now live for everybody who's watching on the live stream. I'm not pre-recorded anymore. I am really here. So let's get right into it. I'm just gonna give you a quick overview of where we're gonna be going during this message. We're gonna start out with a couple of definitions about technology and one other important definition for us. And then we're gonna be going into some statistics and research on the use of technology in our world. And then we are going to be looking into the Bible to see what the Bible has to say about our use of technology. So let's start off with our first definition here. Technology, machinery and equipment developed from the application of scientific knowledge. This is a good general definition for technology, how most of us understand it. So it's a device that we've invented by applying science and our discoveries in the world about how to use different things. And so today, when I say technology, I'm mostly going to be referring to screens. So that's our phones, our computers, our TVs, the internet, stuff like that. But this really can be applied to all pieces of technology. Another important thing we're going to go over is I'm going to talk about, sometimes you have the question, is technology good or bad? And well, the answer is it's not good or bad, because it's just really a brick. And so to go over this, I'm going to introduce a word to you called amoral, and this is what that word means. Amoral, lacking a moral sense, unconcerned with the rightness or wrongness of something. So for instance, with my phone isn't concerned about right and wrong, because my phone is not concerned about anything, because it's just an object. And so another way of putting this is this. Any entity that is not conscious may be considered categorically amoral. For example, a rock may be used by rational agents for good or bad purposes, but the rock itself is neither good nor bad. And another good example is we have a brick here. So a brick is not good or bad on its own. It's just a brick. It's not concerned about those things, but what happens is we can use that for either good or bad. So ultimately, it comes down to human responsibility. So somebody could take a brick and they could throw it through their neighbor's window. That would be a bad use of this technology. Or you could hurt somebody with that brick. Or you could take those bricks and you could build a hospital or a school or something that would benefit the people around you, and that would be a good use of technology. So ultimately, technology itself is not good or bad, but it comes down to the responsibility of us to use that technology for good or for bad. Let's use it for good. Okay, now we're going to go into a few statistics on what is our use of technology. And this first one here this is a average that was taken for 2019. This is the average amount of time that people spent on the internet every day worldwide. So this average is taken from all the places in the world, that all the people in the world that use the internet. And the average is this. So on average, the world's internet users spend 6 hours and 42 minutes online each day. That's down slightly on last year's figures of 6 hours and 49 minutes. But our suspicion is that this drop may be in part due to the large number of new users who are still learning how to use the internet and who use the internet less than those more seasoned users who turn to their connected devices. So we are on our screen a lot. And this is actually just for 2019. I bet you when we get the news for how much screen time we spent in 2020, it's going to be even higher than that because of the circumstances with COVID and everything. But let's put this, well, I guess I'll be a little bit personal. I'll be a bit vulnerable. I'll tell you how much time I was on a screen personally over the last 2 weeks. So not this last week, but the week before. Get ready for this. You might be shocked. I was on a screen for 59 hours and 54 minutes. So that's just under 60 hours I was on a screen. That was 2 weeks ago. The week before that, I was on a screen for 42 hours and 49 minutes. Now that one, if 42 hours and 49 minutes sounds like a lot to you, that's about exactly the average that most people in the world spend on the internet throughout a day. So it's a lot of time. I did some number crunching on this myself to see, to put it into perspective. And so this is an example. If you started using the internet around the time you were 8 and you lived to 70 years old, on average, if we're going by this average, you would spend 135,408 hours on the internet, maybe even more if you can include other screen time interaction that's not on the internet. And so if we go with that number, that is about 22.8% of your life, 22% of your life. And if you take that and apply it to the time that you're actually awake doing stuff, so you're not sleeping, it's about a third of your waking hours. So think about that for a second. A third of your waking hours. If you kind of are just going with the flow of society, just like everybody else, you're kind of in that average. Might be a little bit more, might be a little bit less. But the idea is here, we probably will spend about a third of our waking hours in front of a screen. And that might be a scary thought to you. Another way to look at this is if you were to live to 70 and started using it around 10 years old, it'd be 20 years of your life in front of a screen. And for those 20 years, you would be sleeping during those 20 years, but all the time that you're not sleeping, you're spending on a screen. So that is a lot of time that we are spending on our screens. And that might scare you at first, but don't worry, there are going to be good things that we can do with our screen use. And so it's not all going to be bad, but definitely something to think about. Let's move on to some research on some of the things that negatively can affect us from our screens. First one's on sleep. So screens can cause disrupted sleep. The blue light that screens emit can be detrimental to your sleep. By suppressing melatonin, this light can affect your circadian rhythm and make it hard for you to fall asleep and stay asleep. If you are guilty of using screens before bed, you may be inadvertently reducing the quality of your sleep. They later suggest in this article to completely cut out screen time up to an hour or 2 hours before you go to bed in order to get a really restful sleep. There's a lot of research out there on sleep in particular and the negative effects that technology can have. So that's definitely something to be conscious of. For me, my personal testimony with phones and going to sleep is I pretty much used to play video games every night before I went to get bed, probably every night, especially in my high school years, even up until recently. I'd always be on my phone or watching a show or playing video games before I went to bed. And it's only been recently in my life that I've decided to try and go to bed earlier and shift that time away from my phone and just start going to bed winding down by either reading or just thinking. And what I've found, it's taken me a while, but what I've found more recently is that I actually get to my bedtime now, and I have my phone. Sometimes I'll still be on it, still checking stuff. But then I just have this joy inside, this happiness that I feel when I get to turn my phone off. It sounds really weird, but it's like this time I have at the end of the day where I can turn my phone off now. I can leave it away, I can put it away, and I can just be content with my day, maybe think about some of the things that I was thankful for that day, read a little bit of my Bible, and then just go to sleep. And I've found that has been a really helpful routine in my life. So if you're somebody who is on your phone before you go to bed, that could be something to consider. So our next piece of research is kind of just about how addicting our phones can be. And this is some research done by Harvard University. But here, let's get into it. This is talking about dopamine, which is a chemical in our brain that gives us a good feeling of reward. So, variable reward schedules. How do social media apps take advantage of this dopamine-driven learning strategy? Similar to slot machines, many apps implement a reward pattern optimized to keep you engaged as much as possible. Variable reward schedules were introduced by psychologist B.F. Skinner in the 1930s. In his experiments, he found that mice respond most frequently to reward-associated stimuli when the reward was administered after a varying number of responses, precluding the animal's ability to predict when they would be rewarded. In short, they were attracted to random rewards. If it was going to be something that surprised them, then they would keep going after it. And so this is what he says: humans are no different. If we perceive a reward to be delivered at random, and if checking for the reward comes at little cost, we end up checking habitually. Example, it would be a gambling addiction. And now he's applying this to phones because it's for phones too. If you pay attention, you might find yourself checking your phone at the slightest feeling of boredom, purely out of habit. And programmers are working very hard behind the screens to keep you doing exactly that. So our phones and our screens are definitely designed in a way that they are trying to grip us. They're trying to have us spend all our time on them. So it's just an important thing to be aware of, that there is, a lot of scientific research that our phones can be addictive. And now it's talking about addiction here, but really at this point now, this is just something that most people are affected by across the board. And so we definitely have a tendency to do that. My experience with this, I'll give you an example. My experience with noticing this, how much I habitually check my phone, is I've been taking Mondays off of technology. So that means I turn off my screens entirely. I don't go on a screen at all on a Monday. And the first couple Mondays I did this, it was extremely difficult. I felt really uncomfortable. I felt like everything took way more effort than it normally does. And I was constantly reaching to my phone, even though I didn't have my phone. I was in my car, in Ladner, and I was reaching for my phone all the time, even though I knew it was at home. And I just realized how habitual it had come for me to just always be reaching for my phone. Another example of this habit would be I had this news feed on my phone, and I would get distracted by it a lot. So when I opened my phone, I swiped to the right, and there's my news feed. And I would often just find a bunch of news that was exciting and interesting for me, and I spent a lot of time doing that. A couple months ago, I disabled that feature so that now when I swipe to the right, nothing happens. But it took me about 2 months to stop swiping to the right. I would open my phone and I would try and get to that news feed, even though it wasn't there, just because I had the habit. So this is important to remember, that it can be a habit for us. It's something to be really careful about. We're going to go on to a little bit of research now on some positive advice on how to manage this and deal with it. And so what do we do about it? This is an article from Time, and we'll read. So the goal is finding balance between screen-based activities and non-screen activities. Dogden Maggie says, if you're blowing off your friends and family in favor of spending time on screens, that's a problem. Ditto if you think your attention span is shrinking. Or if you're always leaving chores half finished, she says. The right question to ask, says Cal Newport, an associate professor of computer science at Georgetown University, is what value are you getting out of the time you spend looking at screens, and what value are you losing? If you find your screens are starting to displace activities you think are more important or meaningful, that's a sign that you may want to reconsider your use, he says. The classic example, says Newport, is the parent who's distracted by his smartphone when he should be interacting with his children. If it's your kid's bath time and you're looking at a phone, that's a wake-up call, he says. Later on, the article concludes with this. Newport says the goal isn't to eliminate screens from your life. It's to imbue the time you spend on screens with intentionality. You want the feeling that your technology is improving your life, not detracting from its quality, he says. So it's a really good way to conclude our portion of research and statistics. The idea here is I'm not saying, if it sounds like I'm saying I think that we shouldn't use technology at all, that's not what I'm saying. But what I really want to encourage everybody to do is think intentionally about technology. So don't just use it aimlessly. Think intentionally about it. So that's all we have for statistics. I hope that wasn't too overwhelming for you. Take a deep breath if you need. We're going to move on to now the Bible and what the Bible has to say about technology. You might be thinking the Bible doesn't talk about technology at all. It does, actually. We're going to start out, though, by talking about a bit of technology and idolatry. So our point here that you can write down in the notes, we'll have it up there. So this is our first point. Don't worship your screen, worship Jesus. This is point number 1. Don't worship your screen, worship Jesus. We're going to read through part of the Bible from the Old Testament where God is addressing the idolatry of humans. He gives a story. He talks about a man who is using technology. He's using tools and science to build a fire and cook his food. And then he's also using his technology to make a statue that he goes and worships. And so in this example, we're going to see that there can be a positive use of technology, but we don't want to make it into an idol. So let's read. This is Isaiah chapter 44, 6 to 22. We will get to the part on the screen in a second. But he starts off with this. This is what the Lord says, Israel's King and Redeemer, the Lord of heaven's armies. I am the first and the last. There is no other God. Who is like me? Let him step forward and prove to you his power. Let him do as I have done since ancient times, when I established a people and explained its future. Who but a fool would make his own God, an idol that cannot help him one bit? All who worship idols will be disgraced, along with all these craftsmen, mere humans who claim they can make a god. They may all stand together, but they will stand in terror and shame. The blacksmith stands at his forge to make a sharp tool, pounding and shaping it with all his might. His work makes him hungry and weak. It makes him thirsty and faint. Then the wood carver measures a block of wood and draws a pattern on it. He works with chisel and plane and carves it into a human figure. He gives it human beauty and puts it in a little shrine. He cuts down cedars. He selects the cypress and the oak. He plants the pine in the forest to be nourished by the rain. Then he uses part of the wood to make a fire. With it, he warms himself and bakes his bread. That's a good thing. Then, yes, it's true, he takes the rest of it and makes himself a god to worship. He makes an idol and bows down in front of it. He burns part of the tree to roast his meat and keep himself warm. He says, that fire feels good. Then he takes what's left and makes his god, a carved idol. He falls down in front of it, worshiping and praying to it. Rescue me, he says. You are my God. Such stupidity and ignorance. Their eyes are closed and they cannot see. Their minds are shut and they cannot think. The person who made the idol never stops to reflect why it's just a block of wood. I burned half of it for heat and used it to bake my bread and roast my meat. How can the rest of it be a god? Should I bow down to worship a piece of wood? The poor deluded fool feeds on ashes. He trusts something that can't help him at all. Yet he cannot bring himself to ask, is this idol that I am holding in my hand a lie? God concludes with this. He says, "Pay attention, O Jacob, for you are my servant, O Israel. I, the Lord, made you, and I will not forget you. I have swept away your sins like a cloud. I have scattered your offenses like the morning mist. Oh, return to me, for I have paid the price to set you free." So here we have this picture of a man who's using technology, and on one hand, he's doing something really useful. He's making a fire, he's roasting his meat, he's keeping warm, all stuff that makes sense to do with technology. But then on the other hand, he takes that same technology and he makes an idol for himself to worship. And now, this might not be a piece of wood. It might be a little bit more advanced. But really, at the end of the day, our cell phones and our TVs and all sorts of things like that, they're just made up of material. This is glass. It's got some rubber in it. It's got a bunch of metal wiring on the inside. And ultimately, really, if I were to take a hammer to this, you would see pretty quickly that it would break and shatter, and we would realize that it's just an object. And so our challenge today is that we do not want to worship our screens. There's only one God, and we need to give all of our time and our attention and our affection to Him. And this phone can be something that can be used as a tool, and it can be used as a beneficial thing, but we don't want to worship it. And so, again, for that, he says here that he takes what is left and makes his God a carved idol. He falls down in front of it, worshiping and praying to it, saying, "Rescue me, you are my God." Now, you might be thinking, well, I don't really pray to my phone. I don't really pray to my technology. That's weird. And you're right. You probably don't actually pray to your phone. But here's the idea. If we are giving our time, our attention, and our affection, and our heart to our phones, when we should be giving them to God, that is what idolatry is about. Another way to look at it is this. God is the one who provides all of the things that we need. He provides us comfort and peace and joy. And he can provide all these things to us in a very real way. But so often, I've found myself, instead of going to God for those things, I go to my phone. I go to my phone for joy. I go to my phone for peace. I go to my phone for comfort. And so in that sense, in many ways, there has been times in my life where I've replaced God with my phone. And so really what I need to do is I need to turn from that. And God gives us hope at the end. He says that He has not forgotten us, even though we have made idols. And we need to turn from that and go to Him instead. So let's continue on to our second point. And this is something that Paul talks about later on in the Bible, and he's writing a letter to the Corinthians. He's just explained to them all sorts of instructions on what to do with idolatry and idols, and he's given a warning about this. He comes to this conclusion, and it's a very good application for us. So we want to flee from idolatry. We don't want to worship our phones, but then what do we do with them? Because we still are going to use them. And this is what he says. He says in 1 Corinthians chapter 10, he says this, "So whether you eat or drink or whatever you do it all for the glory of God. Don't give offense to Jews or Gentiles or the church of God. I too try to please everyone in everything I do. I don't just do what is best for me, I do what is best for others so that they may be saved." So, use your technology to glorify God and help others grow. So we're going to run away from our technology when we need to. When it's becoming too much of a focus, too much of an obsession, we need to maybe put it away. But we can also use technology to glorify God. Some examples of that, a great example actually, is our tech team today, who is doing an awesome job. They're using technology, they're using their gifts that God has given them to glorify Him. And also some of you might be watching this on a screen, and that is an awesome use of technology. So there are a lot of really good uses of technology. We can use it to glorify God. We can also use it to help other people. And so, you know, our mission statement at Community of Hope Church is helping people grow in their relationship with God and with each other. And so we can use our technology to do that. This week, it might be something like giving somebody a video call or a phone call that needs to be encouraged. It could be sharing a message or a God's word with somebody who needs to hear it. It could be hanging out with somebody and playing games with them. There's all kinds of different ways that we can help other people and glorify God with our technology. And so, again, whatever you do, do it all for the glory of God. And I really like his focus on this at the end. He says, I don't just do what is best for me. I do what is best for others so that they may be saved, or that many may be saved. So when we use our technology, let's not just use it to please ourselves, to entertain ourselves, to give more stuff to ourselves, but let's use it to encourage and help the people around us. And ask God to help us with this as well. So our third point here is that sometimes what we need to do with our technology is to leave it behind. Sometimes we need to go away. So take time completely away from your screens and spend it with God. Jesus is a perfect example for this. There's many times in the Bible where Jesus, he took intentional time away from all the distractions. They didn't have phones, but they had their own sorts of distractions. And Jesus would take intentional time away from all of that to go and talk with God, spend time with his Father. So in Mark chapter 1, it says this, rising very early in the morning while it was still dark, he departed and went out to a desolate place, and there he prayed. So it's really important for us to create space in our lives where our screens aren't interrupting us. We talked about that analogy at the beginning. Our screens are like a highway that is bringing the world to us. And sometimes that can be a good thing, but sometimes we need to spend time away from that. Time to reflect on God's word, time to pray, and just time to spend with him away from all the distractions. So to conclude, we have our 3 points. Don't worship your screen. Worship Jesus. Use your screen to glorify God and help people grow. Put your screens away and spend time alone with God. In order to do all of this, we need God's grace. We need the gospel. And the gospel is this. Jesus Christ, who's the Son of God, he came to this earth. He died. The reason he died was for us to pay for all of the mistakes we've made, all the sin that we have. And so he died to pay for that and to forgive us. He's buried, and 3 days later, he's rose again from the dead, which means today he's still alive, and he is very, very active. So if you have a relationship with God, you know him, I encourage you to think about ways to honor him with your use of technology. And if you don't know him already, I encourage you to start a relationship with him today. Ultimately, we need his grace and we need his forgiveness to be able to apply these lessons today. So I'm going to pray and then invite the worship team up to close us off. Dear Heavenly Father, thank you for today and